The General Book of the Tarot by Adolphe Ernestus Thierens. Introduction. If a treatise were ever to be composed regarding the romance of symbolism, its hypothesis of interpretation, and its traditional and imputed histories, a considerable space would assuredly be allocated to tarot cards. And seeing that at this present day there is greater concern regarding the subject than was felt even in the past, there would be a call not only to survey that which lies behind us, a strange field of speculation and reverie, but also the prospect extending in front, since every year brings forth some new proposition and provides material for future imaginative flights. It is most curious to contrast those comparatively sober terms in which Comte de Gebelin introduced his discovery of the cards, although he sought to prove that their origin lay in ancient Egypt, with the fantastic declamations of Eliphas Levi, who affirmed not only that they were the alphabet of Enoch, Hermes Trismegistus, and Cadmus, but also the gospel of all gospels, a synthesis of science and the universal key of the Kabbalah. De Gebelin was a man of learning in his own period and remained within the circle of facts, actual or supposed, as he perceived and read them. His successor was a man of extravagant intellect, who contemplated the past and future alike through a visionary glass, and thus beheld all fairy unfold its images. The occult occurrences of the past became in the process as much a matter of invention as his own notions. The inventions were decorative and were even characterized at times by a Magian quality of intuition. Yet in most instances, his record of past events was akin to his reading of things to come. His narrative of the Knights Templar, his intimations regarding the Rosy Cross, and his survey of alchemical literature are in much the same category as his prognostications concerning a parliament of nations under a universal monarchy ruled by a king of France. He discovered the religion behind all religions, a fountain source from which they issued in their day and into which all return. This was the secret tradition of Israel. However, it proves to be a tradition of his own making, which falsifies all the literature, for he had not read the texts from which he claimed to draw. He had glanced here and there at a few records of the subject and distorted them in the magic crystal of his seership. He took up the tarot, and just as a cartomancer shuffles, deals, and lays out its picture symbols for the reading of things to come, so did he divine their past. He adopted the speculations of de Gebelin, and they dilated within his own mind. He arrayed the trumps major in Egyptian vestures and affirmed that he had restored the tarot to its primitive hieroglyphical form. By a fortunate chance, there had preceded him in 1857 another fantasist, J. F. Valiant, possessing a gift in etymologies more stupefying than anything produced before him. Between them, there deployed all of Babylon and all its idols. But Egypt loomed behind Babylon, and the Kabbalah behind Egypt. It is post-Talmudic in unadorned fact, but for them it was older than Moses and older even than Abraham. Ultimately, behind the Kabbalah there was, and remains among us, the Book of Thoth, and this was the tarot, within which was the unlimited light of its endless range of meanings that had never passed into writing but dwelt implicitly in both, above all in Levi's mind. And a day arrived when he made his great discovery, which had never entered previously into the heart of scholiast or commentator. The tree of life in Kabbalism possesses 22 paths by which the Sephiroth or numerations are connected one with another, and late Kabbalism had married these paths to the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. However, the tarot trumps major are also 22, and Eliphas Levi proclaimed another marriage, constituting a trinity in unity of cards, paths, and letters. It has been the joy of all occult hierophants and their believing disciples through the decades that followed. Upon all these, Levi has exercised a great influence in French circles, and seeing that tarot expository literature is almost exclusively French, he calls for consideration at length when estimating expository values. It was not in the least needful but was pleasant, if opportunity offered, to find that there were others before him who knew and had used the tarot keys to some purpose. As a matter of fact, there was St. John on Patmos, the proof being that he wrote his book of Revelations in 22 chapters. The Apocalypse henceforward, for true initiates, became an exposition of tarot trumps. It had not occurred to Levi or to those who followed him that the arrangement of scripture texts in divisions called chapters is unhappily a late device. There was also Louis Claude de Saint Martin, who was one of the true initiates, and he had written a certain tableau, setting forth the relations between God, man, and the universe. He divided it into numbered parts which reached the same total, so the natural tableau arises out of the tarot and returns therein. After what manner the cards and the sections belong to one another in either case, it was not to be expected perhaps that a French magus should unfold, though he held the key of all things, so the allocation remains a mystery even to this day, while the Levi successors in France reproduce their master's dogmas from generation to generation. Hereof is the tarot in its literary history, from the pre-French Revolution primitive world of Court de Gebelin to the year 1870, when it occurred to P. Christian, a former librarian, that the history of magic might be extended further, with profit, by the gentle art of invention. The Franco-Prussian War stood on the threshold of events. Eliphas Levi had been silent for 5 years and was forgotten for the time being, though still in print. It was safe to borrow something of his motives and manner, as also from the spectacular findings in his glass of vision. So Christian borrowed accordingly, and his tale of fatality across times and peoples is the history of magic of Levi, retold after another manner and with more liberal and frequent appeal to the repertory of the father of lies. Christian possessed none of those literary gifts which adorn the pages of Levi, but his inventions are highly sensational and often microscopical in detail. It seems probable even that, like his predecessor, he began by convincing himself that things should have happened in that or in this way and therefore did, that his divinatory devices foretold the future, at least now and then. It is precisely this kind of mischief which begets itself in others, and altogether I am not surprised that Christian's The Red Man of the Tuileries, which followed, I think, his history of magic, has become of authority among grimoires and is sought eagerly, or that he is still quoted off and on for his tarot views. A space of 15 years elapsed, and circa 1885 a group of neo-Martinists began to be formed in Paris, with Papus, Dr. Gerard Incosse, at their head. As it happened that notwithstanding the 22 sections of his natural tableau, St. Martin contributed nothing to tarot lore, had in all probability never glanced at the mysterious card symbols, and abandoned early and definitely all occult workings, the Martinism of the late 19th century signified, as a name only, that its followers had their eyes turned to the esoteric tradition of the West, rather than that of the East, and in their preoccupation were thinly Christian rather than theosophical in the sense of modern theosophy, through which some of them had passed and had come forth unsatisfied. The master-in-chief of Papus was always Eliphas Levi, to whom his occult notions are referable in the last resource, whose Kabbalism is his Kabbalism and whose tarot is his tarot. Papus worked indefatigably at these subjects and extended them on every side, producing great inventions, with a certain laborious sincerity, as I shall be disposed always to think. But, like those who preceded and those who have come after him, Papoose was an occultist, not a mystic, and from my point of view, the pictorial symbols of the image-makers of the Middle Ages, as Oswald Wirth terms them, unfold their meanings in this other and higher light. The Martinist school, along with its connections and derivatives, produced their tarots sub nomine Falconeer, sub nomine Alta, and sub nomine Oswald Wirth. Furthermore, there existed other artists and diviners, some deriving illumination from one another, while others ignited an occasional torch or a casual flash of their own accord. The monographs proliferated, and the Marquis Stanislas de Guaita produced a sequence of treatises wherein the entirety of occultism unfolded from the Trumps Major. There was no cessation to the activities, with the pageantry of Levi invariably present in the background and frequently occupying the forefront. When 25 years had elapsed in this manner and the tarot bibliography had attained considerable dimensions, the War of 1914 engulfed all the schools along with their bold imaginings. Upon the war's eventual suspension by the figurative Peace of Versailles, the schools emerged but sluggishly from the tumultuous chaos, stripped of their principal figures, their adornments, and their appeal. The names of certain among them remain with us to this day, centered within a small group at Lyons. Nevertheless, French occultism, distinct from specific schools and incorporated pretensions, appears vigorously alive, and Oswald Wirth has recently produced the most decorative tarot study, regarding form, that has appeared since the subject first came to our attention. His focus is directed solely to the Trumps Major, and he offers little commentary on the divinatory side of the subject, that ostensibly practical facet which engrosses the majority of those who style themselves students of the tarot. It is not my personal concern, yet it is evident from my familiarity with the literature that there exists scope for fresh treatment in this regard. Dr. Thierens has approached the matter from an astrological standpoint in the volume that these preliminary pages are designed to introduce. I have been induced to do so because scarcely anything has previously been printed regarding the zodiacal attributions of the cards, and because I happen to be acquainted with unpublished divinatory methods utilizing these attributions for many years within a certain occult circle. There exists a body of tarot literature that has not yet emerged into the light of day, some of which is exceedingly curious. It was said of old in a very different connection. What now holds, let it hold until it is taken out of the way, and I am uncertain whether certain persisting difficulties will ultimately be removed, thereby allowing the theoretical and practical speculations of such circles to be compared with those advanced publicly during recent and earlier years. In this manner, we should at least possess the general subject of the tarot fully expanded. Meanwhile, Dr. Thierens has approximated, more closely than any other, a valid interpretation of Tarot Trump Major number 12, the Hanged Man. From Court de Gebelin to Papoose and Stanislas de Guaita, not excluding Oswald Wirth himself, all published exoteric meanings remain utterly remote from the true significance of this most pregnant symbol. In my pictorial key to the tarot and in the little key accompanying Miss Pamela Coleman Smith's complete set of the cards, produced long ago under my own auspices, that which was permissible at the time was stated concerning it. I shall now offer one further indication. The human figure of the symbol is suspended head downward, and as such it is comparable to the microprosopis or god of reflections in the so-called Great Symbol or Double Triangle of Solomon, prefixed by Levi to his dogma and ritual of high magic, serving as the frontispiece of the first volume. It follows that the true symbol belonging to Trump Major number 12, although it is by no means that of Levi, is not a hanged man at all. Yet it will continue to be depicted in this manner unless and until the greater arcana are issued by the authority of another secret circle, which, thus far, has never officially testified concerning itself within the outer channels of research. I have stated that every year brings forth some new consideration, and Dr. Thierens promises another work, while the speculation just ventured speaks of things unattempted yet conceived within the mind. No intention is signified. However, I know which emblems would adorn it. How matters will stand with the tarot in days to come may therefore loom vaguely. Yet, obviously, there are activities impending. There is, however, one aspect of the subject upon which no horizon opens. As to where the trumps major originated, how and with whom, there is no conclave of adepts to inform us, nor any isolated student holding evidential warrants. At present, we can anticipate only further speculations and dreams to come. Arthur Edward Waite. Chapter 1. The Doctrine. The knowledge of the tarot, transmitted to us through the ages and as we find it at the commencement of the 20th century, can be traced within the writings of many authors. Its most perfect interpretations to date are to be found in the works of Eliphas Levi, Dogma and Ritual of High Magic, and Dr. Pappus, The Tarot of the Bohemians and the Divinatory Tarot. These may be said to represent the supreme results of earlier times, including Attila and P. Christian. A booklet by S. L. MacGregor Mathers, an author renowned for his works on subjects relating to the Kabbalah, quotes J. F. Valiant as stating that it belongs to the beginning of our time, to the epoch of the preparation of the zodiac, and the great divinity Ashtaro as tarot is none other than the Indo-Tartar Tantara, the tarot, the zodiac. This is curious, and we wonder whether either of them ever devised so much as a genuine scheme of this relationship between the tarot system and zodiacal principles. If so, as far as we are aware, it did not appear publicly. Another well-known author on ancient mysteries and symbolism, Arthur Edward Waite, who revised and introduced an English edition of Pappus' The Tarot of the Bohemians by A. P. Morton, has presented us with a still more precious booklet entitled The Key to the Tarot, from which we quote, "The tarot is symbolism. It speaks no other language and offers no other signs." And we would add that true symbolism is always the figurative rendering of cosmological truth or natural principles and laws in a visual, linguistic, or mental image. If astrological symbolism accomplishes the same, why should we not seek a correlation between the two systems? Furthermore, if we conclude, as we must, that both systems provide a rendering of the process of creation itself, totally and definitely, then the two must practically present the same point of view. Consequently, a comparison between them must not only be instructive but may elucidate both. In the present work, it is our ardent desire to join with Mr. Waite, so that the effect of current charlatanism and lack of intelligence may be reduced to a minimum. We shall abstain from any specific criticism and pass over the more ancient literature on the subject, by such writers as Attila, Court de Gebelin, P. Christian, etc., literature that has been mostly embodied in the works mentioned above, which we especially recommend to those readers who wish to study the subject exhaustively. The finest tarot cards are those drawn by Miss Pamela Coleman Smith, published in England, and issued with Mr. Waite's booklet. The designs on these cards appear to be the purest in their symbolical details and drawn with inspiration and clear vision, although the ancient description or traditional rendering has evidently been followed in general. The symbolical system of the tarot consists of 78 picture cards, of which 22 constitute the major arcana or trumps major, and 56 the minor arcana, trumps minor. To our knowledge, the concept of an analogy with the zodiacal mysteries has, until this point, achieved no greater practical realization than a somewhat diffuse comparison of the four colors, or suits of the lesser arcana with the 4 cosmic elements, as observed in astrology. Chapter 2. The Lesser Arcana. The deck comprising the Lesser Arcana is generally acknowledged as the progenitor of our contemporary playing cards, although subsequent authorities do not entirely concur on this matter. Thus, we find Dr. Pappus stating, "Wands have evolved into the clubs of our modern playing cards, cups into hearts, swords into spades, and pentacles into diamonds." Mr. Waite, in his key, asserts, "Wands or scepters, diamonds, cups correspond to hearts, swords answer to clubs, and finally pentacles, which are the prototype of spades. The discrepancies are manifest." Furthermore, inquiries may arise regarding how one author could equate swords with clubs, when linguistically a wand and a club originally signify the same object and encompass the identical meaning, viz., that of a detached portion of a living tree, and further how another could perceive wands as corresponding to diamonds, while a third associates pentacles with clubs. Evidently, a sword must correlate to a spade and a wand to a club, the designations being virtually identical. There appears, however, to be some difficulty regarding the remaining 2. I object to the classification provided by Pappus and MacGregor-Mathers and can readily adduce proof against it. Significant divergences such as these, encountered in the writings of the principal authorities on the subject, indicate that something is lacking in the comprehension of the doctrine itself, and that the underlying rationale, the why, has been lost or at least partially obscured. The quest for this doctrine is undoubtedly worthy of the effort, and we shall endeavor, in the ensuing pages, to trace it to its origin within general cosmological principles. The primary point we wish to emphasize is this: the system of the tarot is of such import that no explanation can be deemed satisfactory save for that which recognizes it as a general outline of creation itself, a creation which has always existed and continues to exist, pervading every creature and every entity with its principles as a divine immanence. Therefore, Pappus is entirely correct in stating that each card of the tarot represents a symbol, a number, and an idea. At the foundation of creation lie the 4 cosmic elements, as symbolically cited by visionaries such as Ezekiel and St. John of Patmos, and as taught by ancient astrology. It requires no extraordinary intuition on the part of the occult student to recognize, in the 4 colors of our playing cards or the 4 suits of the tarot's lesser arcana, those 4 fundamental elements: fire, earth, air, and water. The question remains, however, which corresponds to which? There must have been an era when knowledge of these matters was more accessible than is the case today. The symbols themselves attest to this. A student of occultism must prioritize attention to symbols above all else. What, then, do they reveal to us? Wands. Indeed, it is a curious fact that all authors agree in naming wands or clubs in the primary position. In our deck of playing cards, the figurative symbol for this suit is the trefoil trifolio, and Mr. Ouspensky depicts the wands bearing leaves that, in many instances, appear to be threefold, or at least should be so. The trefoil or shamrock has always been considered a charm of good fortune, a bringer of luck. It is constructed upon the schema of the triangle, the symbol of the Trinity. The totality of the figure also appears in the Masonic trefoil, which is an emblem of the divine Trinity combined with the principle of activity, indicated by the staff or wand itself, seemingly crossed as in the ancient emblem. In a sense, we must regard this symbol as revealing the highest conception of creation. The Trinity, pure and simple, with only the rudiment of activity indicated, poised above the circle, insofar as the latter suggests motion. Thus wands, clubs, or clovers are most certainly intended as the symbol of the highest element in creation. The question has often been posed as to whether, in the astrological concept of creation, air or fire ought to be regarded as the supreme element. The answer is contingent upon the perspective we adopt. In the highest cosmological or cosmophilosophical sense, it is fire. In a cosmopractical or cosmonatural sense, it is air, as the secret doctrine undoubtedly elucidates, wherein the dissolution of the cosmos at the conclusion of a Manvantara is discussed, stating that the earth is dissolved or engulfed by the waters, water is evaporated by fire, and finally fire disappears into the air. Here, air acts as the atmosphere of the globe or system undergoing disappearance. Thus, for all practical purposes in astrology as well, it is air that is capable of providing the highest expression of the divine. As the atmosphere of a globe, it serves as the nexus between that globe and the ether of space, conveying the rays of the divine solar center as well as those of the relatively demoniacal surroundings to the other elements that constitute the existence of the globe. In a similar fashion, the suit of wands will appear to be something of a link between the lesser and the greater arcana. This will be addressed subsequently. Viewed in this light, air is the bearer of the message from the divine or unmanifest to the terrestrial or manifested worlds. Consequently, wands are the significators of the detailed messages and of intelligences which astrologically correspond to air, and thus of higher thought and mental processes. The magic wand is employed to convey the divine, or at least semi-divine, willpower of the self, acting as a magician, into the world of phenomena. Just as in the macrocosm the message goes forth to the water and metals, so in the microcosm on Earth, a wand may be utilized to locate water and metals within the soil. This may appear curious, yet it is pure analogy. From days of old, a wand or staff was employed to chastise, to render chaste or pure, the undisciplined or disobedient. This was a penalty as much symbolical as corporeal, the staff being at the same time the insignia of a superior willpower or supervision. Hermes Mercury, lord of the element of air, of knowledge, and of understanding, bearer of the message of the gods, bore as his emblem his renowned wand, encompassed by two serpents and surmounted by a cup. He was styled Trismegistus, the threefold great, or the great trefoil, which might also be translated as Lord or Magister of the Register of the Trefoil, King of the Wands. And the pilgrim, who journeyed to hear the word of deliverance and to gather knowledge, took up a staff, not merely as a walking stick but also as a symbol of his quest. The latter finds illustration in the legend of Tannhauser, whose sin was so grave that its expiation could be expected as little as the budding of new leaves upon his pilgrim's staff. This staff was evidently perceived as an image of the principle of the wand within his own soul. And when, by the force of love, a higher understanding budded forth within him, this fact was symbolized by the apparition of a fresh green leaf upon his staff. The ancient Norsemen, highly susceptible to symbolism, inscribed their signs of communication or messages upon staf, wands, which became the origin of the later word Buchstabe in German, pentacles. Generally, cups are named in the second position, yet they are simultaneously identified with hearts. We concur that hearts occupy the second place in the hierarchy of the tarot suits, but we do not perceive that they should be equated with cups. Naturally, we understand that the heart has been described as the cup receiving and containing the divine life, etc. Nevertheless, we disagree, and indeed consider the parable rather superficial, for it leaves the mutual relationship of the three remaining elements in a distorted condition. Moreover, the symbolical designations, as provided by the various authors previously mentioned, do not accord. If viewed in their entirety, wands represent the message of the macrocosm or ideation, just as air conveys the message from the ether, and if we assume that the imagery of the tarot system was intended for cosmopractical or cosmonatural application, then we must anticipate finding within the remaining three suits the incarnate elements of spirit, soul, and body. These, therefore, collectively constitute the microcosm in toto. Astrology assigns symbols to this triad: the sun, the moon, and the ascendant. More precisely, we should identify them as the fifth, the ninth, and the first houses within the horoscopic circle. One may consult our second volume on cosmology, entitled Elements of Astrology. If we employ a pentacle, a cup, and a sword to denote these three principles, it is undoubtedly the pentacle, stamped upon the golden coin or inscribed within the circle, that corresponds to the heart and the principle of spirit, situated in the fifth house. It is here that the human spirit, with its fivefold nature, originates, and here that the fivefold magic or creative force resides. It is difficult to conceive of any other significance for the pentacle than the symbolization of the fifth house in creation, which serves as the heart of every living being. There is no doubt whatsoever that, within the horoscope, the inception of the spiritual spiral lies in the fifth house. Gold is the metal governed by the sun, the lord of the fifth sign, Leo, which is the heart of the solar system. Thus, pentacles or golden coins equate to the hearts in playing cards and correspond to the element of fire. Indeed, the symbol in playing cards is depicted with the natural resemblance of a heart. There is equally little doubt regarding the element of fire, for as every astrologer acknowledges, spirit, soul, and body maintain the same relationship as fire, water, and earth. One may compare this to the secret doctrine, where a center of fire and water is cited as the origin of a new incarnation on earth. Curiously, divination has never interpreted hearts as symbolizing anything other than matters pertaining to, or emanating from, the heart. To this extent, this suit or color has been correctly understood. However, its gold is a spiritual symbol and, initially, has no connection to money. It is within the soul, not the spirit, that the concept of repayment is forged, although spiritual gold may undoubtedly be regarded as the origin of all that subsequently manifests as vulgar currency. Cups. As is well established in astrology, the soul is governed by the moon and the element of water. It is within the cosmic principle of soul, or, in other words, the cosmic soul, that the truth of the philosophic statement Panta Rei is revealed. Furthermore, there is no more fitting symbol for the specific nature of the soul in concreto than that of a cup or chalice containing the liquor of life. The cup is indeed sufficiently evocative regarding the element of water. When Jesus prayed, "Lord, let this chalice pass from me," he referred to something he feared would fill his soul with bitterness. Moreover, at the Last Supper, he passed the chalice of brotherhood among the disciples as a token of soul union, a custom still observed by Christian churches and, in ancient times, by King Arthur at the gatherings of the Round Table. Christian churches place great emphasis upon the mystic events associated with the holy chalice on the altar, the receiver of divine light and blessings. Herein, we may perceive a demonstration of the mystery of Christ, the Son of the heart, the divine soul utilizing the persona of Jesus as its cup or vessel. In one of the Masonic high grades, the cup reappears in the symbolic supper of brotherhood. The quest for the Holy Grail, the legendary holy chalice or cup of felicity, foreshadowed in church ritual, is well known to represent the soul's thirst or solicitude for the spiritual water or wine of life divine. The Grail itself symbolizes the form of a human or superhuman personality, a soul of human nature filled or fulfilled by this divine essence, whereby it becomes a holy one, a master, or an elder brother. Thus, it signifies the quest of the common human soul for the master soul. Cups or beakers are utilized throughout the world to drink toasts of welcome and friendship, expressing the concept of soul union, an acknowledgement that one's soul drinks from the same liquor as another's, namely, the liquor of life or of life's renovation. My soul meets yours in the drinking of the divine wine, and thereby knows that we are brothers. Among playing cards, cups correspond to nothing other than diamonds, in French, carreaux, with the two distinct names expressing precisely the same idea, that of the soul or persona of the spirit. The diamond is a jewel that allows light to pass with almost no loss. The purer its water, the lesser the loss and the higher its value. This is the reason occultists term a perfected soul a diamond soul. The French and the Dutch employ the same simile in a somewhat more prosaic, though still elegant, manner when they compare the soul to a small window through which God looks down into the lower worlds. The same is said of the human eye, which is styled the little window or vensterk of the soul in its turn. This is the origin of the French carreaux and the Dutch ruetten. The symbolic figure is sufficiently clear. Without a shadow of doubt, cups represent diamonds or carreaux and the element of water. Ordinary divination correctly ascribes to cups the property of governing financial matters because the soul is, in fact, the producer of work, which results in the generation of money. The figure for diamonds in playing cards is a square standing on one point, with the opposite point reaching upward. This symbolizes the soul in its primary characteristic, balancing on one end, directed single-pointedly toward heaven or spirit, and on the other hand directed single-pointedly toward earth or matter, thereby squaring the two within itself. One who truly comprehends this may well be termed a square man. Swords. Little choice remains regarding the fourth suit or color. Perhaps a sword resembles a magical instrument more than a spade does, yet both are fashioned from iron, which cleaves the earth or the body of earth. In the Bhagavad Gita, when the evident intention is to clarify that Sri Krishna did not appear in a body of earth or physical form, one of the images employed to convey this meaning is that weapons cleave him not. Originally, the sword and the spade possessed the same meaning. One may compare the Spanish espada and the French épée, both signifying sword. A later definition of spade evolved to denote the agricultural implement. In one sense, namely as a physical instrument and the emblem of executive power, the sword holds much the same significance as the wand or club. Both are instruments of command, compelling obedience. The distinction lies in the nature of the element employed. Wands compel through reason, intelligence, understanding, and moral force. Swords enforce obedience to the laws of earth, material necessity, and actual resistance. This implies, furthermore, that while wands open moral, intellectual, and rational possibilities, swords provide material opportunities. Both suits originate from the first house or Aries, as will be elaborated hereafter, with the one ascending from the inception of intelligence, and the other from the commencement of activity in matter. Swords wound or even kill. They sever the decayed limb from the otherwise healthy body. For this reason, the sword became the symbol of discrimination between practical usefulness and practical uselessness. From this, practical concepts of right and wrong, good and evil spring into being. To wound and to kill is to destroy, partially or wholly, a body of earth. This must not be regretted, as Sri Krishna explains, for it is merely the destruction of Maya, or misleading appearances. That which is an inner reality can never be killed. It is life itself. Thus, swords may signify destruction to some form or body, formula, or limited existence. They may inflict pain, detriment, loss, and sorrow upon bodily existence and material possessions or conditions. Conversely, they may signify renovation, genesis, and regeneration, the elimination of impediments and the clearing of the path and sphere of action, much as a spade tills and turns the garden soil in preparation for fresh sowing. Thus, Jesus might aptly declare, "I have not come to bring peace, but a sword." Similarly, wherever the I or self manifests within the realm of external phenomena, it is compelled to wield either the sword or the spade to eradicate wrongs, illusions, and obstacles, or to turn the soil for new planting. At times, it becomes necessary to excise the unwanted so as to preserve the purity, rectitude, and health of the remainder, akin to a sculptor hewing marble. Likewise, sorrow and pain shall be inflicted upon the body of earth for as long as the hand of the heavenly sculptor rests upon it. The symbolic figure depicting spades and playing cards is the inverse of that for hearts, augmented by a superior design reminiscent of the cross surmounting the circle in the planetary symbol of Mars. It also appears to denote a condition wherein the heart is oppressed by the cross of matter. From the foregoing, it becomes evident why ordinary divination regards spades as maleficent, just as it deems hearts beneficent. It is equally apparent that, from an esoteric perspective, this view does not hold. The colors assigned to spades and wands are invariably black, while hearts and cups are red. The symbology of the tarot is of such purity that this detail cannot be accidental, even if the ordinary deck of playing cards might be regarded, to some degree, as a profanation of the original tarot. These hues, however, convey essential significance, as does every element of the tarot. Wands derive their blackness from the black wisdom. Swords or spades are black due to the earth, which possesses no inherent luminosity. Hearts are colored red by blood, and cups by wine, the liquor of life within the body and the soul, respectively, both of which bear light. Thus, the wine imparts the holy communion of the spirit to the soul, and the blood renders a relative service to the particles of the body, imparting to them the life of the ego, or rather of its soul. As I have elucidated in the previously cited volume, evolution may well be depicted as a spiral originating from the spiritual center and descending through the 12 houses of zodiacal ideation and formation into the worlds, spiritual, psychical, and physical. This spiral of evolution may be partitioned into at least 3 sections. That is to say, 3 distinct beginnings are discernible. There is the divine beginning, commencing in Aries, the sign of initiation and highest abstraction, with the divine cycle concluding in Pisces, where it is relinquished, offered, or sacrificed to the world of appearances. The cycle of the spiritual within man initiates in the 5th sign, Leo. This individual cycle is that of the spark or the ego, proceeding from this sign of the heart to Cancer, the sign of memories. Subsequently, a cycle of the personal being of the ego, the cycle of the soul in man, which we may term the personal cycle, commences in Sagittarius, the sign of thought and manifestation, and terminates in Scorpio, the sign of death. There follows the cycle of the body of earth, with the etheric initiative recurring in Aries at the same point but lower on the scale, and concluding in Pisces as the house of the universal solvent. This applies equally to the body of Earth, for here personal separateness is dissolved into the physical environment of the universe from which it was constructed. Thereafter, the physical organs within the body of Earth are constituted and possess their own cycle, commencing once more in Leo and forming between the heart and the stomach. Cancer. In Sagittarius, physical manifestations in the form of occurrences, deeds, facts, proceedings, and the like begin their cycle in cooperation with their surroundings. This cycle concludes again in Scorpio, where life's lessons or experiences are extracted from the material elements. Since divine intelligence is the genesis of all that constitutes evolution in our conception, the spiral of evolution must necessarily open with the suit of wands, thereby ruling from the 1st to the 12th house. These represent intelligence in general and intelligences within nature. They signify messages, communications, relations, connections, plans, and ideas, as well as knowledge and insight. They operate through the head and are concerned with mutations. Next follow hearts, representing the individual cycle from the 5th to the 4th house. In this cycle, they govern the fiery force of the spirit and symbolize power, benevolence, love, fixed purpose, desire, well-being, virtue, warmth, heat, generation, and development. They operate through the heart. Cups govern the cycle of the soul or the personal cycle, and, operating from the 9th to the 8th house, represent emotions and motives, the activity of the soul, and its experiences ranging from the highest philosophy and religion down to mere lust or sensation. They function through the senses and the organs of motion. They possess what may be described as an undulating movement and may be favorable or unfavorable. Yet, they instigate motion, causing growth and death, rise and decline. They mold life into physical circumstances and forms. They influence all things, this being their specific function. The body of Earth is constructed by the elements of Earth, represented by the suit of swords, extending from the 1st house again to the 12th. These speak of birth and matter, of facts, formations, and resistance, of material fortune and misfortune, achievements and failure in a material respect, of afflictions and pain, but also of the effects produced by this suffering. The cycle of hearts recurs, now signifying the circuit of physical organs. This is precise and may be relied upon absolutely. Every astrologer can articulate the relationship between the houses and the organs of the body. However, it must be borne in mind that this rulership relates primarily to the ethereal centers or chakras, the fiery wheels within the etheric body. Thus, the 5th house rules the solar plexus and the heart, etc. Finally, cups govern the cycle of events, occurrences, and movements, spanning again from the 9th to the 8th house. In a general sense, cups relate to water just as hearts relate to fire, wands to air, and spades to earth, both in the practice of daily life and in a philosophical sense. It appears, furthermore, that each of the 3 cycles comes into play twice. The cycle of Aries-Pisces via wands and swords, that of Leo-Cancer via hearts on 2 different levels, and that of Sagittarius-Scorpio, likewise, twice via cups. Astrologers may perhaps wonder how and why the mutable suits of wands and spades originate from the movable sign Aries, while the movable suit of cups originates from the mutable sign Sagittarius. We can only respond that the facts stand as they are. However, we may add that every suit evidently possesses a particular accent. This accent does not necessarily fall upon the first sign or house, but rather on that wherein house and suit coincide with regard to element and property. Thus, Spades, being earth and mutable, will have their accent in the sign Virgo, the mutable sign of earth, in which discrimination is said to be born. Cups, being water and movable, find theirs in the movable water sign of Cancer, which is, in fact, the proper sign of the moon and in which all properties of the soul may be said to be gathered or concealed. Hearts, being fire and fixed, are accented in the fixed and fiery sign Leo. The suit of hearts appears to be the only one of the four to place its particular accent on the first card or house, which naturally confirms the essential nature of hearts as the interpreter of fire and the center of things. Wands, being air and mutable, have their accent on the airy and mutable sign Gemini, the sign of the messenger. The subsequent cycles constitute various suits of principles in the process of building the cosmos, houses in the holy city of the great architect of the universe. They represent occurrences within the proceedings of evolution and experiences pertaining to involution simultaneously. If the suits of colors in the tarot system convey any significance whatsoever, it must be this. There can be nothing else to represent save for these principles and houses, these occurrences and experiences. We shall observe hereafter how the greater arcana accords with them, but let us now proceed to elucidate the role of the lesser arcana. Each suit of cards is comprised of a set of 14, namely 10 numbered cards, ace through 10, and 4 court cards designated king, queen, page or knave, and knight. The latter has been omitted from standard playing cards. Now, whereas the cosmological cycle consists of 12 houses, these sets or suits contain 10 or 14 cards, depending upon one's perspective. Nevertheless, if we assume that the analogy exists, each principle must be represented in a card and vice versa. Were this not the case, the tarot system would be found lacking. However, we possess sufficient grounds to reject this supposition a priori, based on both theoretical and practical tests, with the traditional interpretations of the cards confirming experience. We need not concern ourselves with why the initiates, who bequeathed such an inheritance to the Western world, elected to enumerate only up to 10 rather than proceeding to 12. The chosen people received only 10 commandments for their guidance. Those who comprehend astrology in its essential significance can perceive something of the reason. Subsequently, when the preacher of divine life came to the same chosen people, he delivered a double new commandment to complete the ancient law, that of brotherhood and love. In each suit of tarot cards, the numbering runs from the 1 or ace to the 10. The king is to be regarded in some manner as a higher octave of the 1, the queen or dame as the same of the 2, whereas the page or knave represents the relation between the 2, and is consequently a higher octave of the 3, while the knight serves as the higher octave of the 4 and the corresponding side of the same relation. This corresponds entirely with the general and conventional meanings of pages and knights in the tarot system and its divination, wherein pages are said to invariably function as messengers, and knights as signifiers of transition, conversion, transmission, or the alteration from one condition to another. Concurrently, however, we encounter the intimation that the page, as well as the knight, bears a double meaning. Now, as they stand for the relation between the two, they already possess an inherent double meaning or a significance of a dual nature. Yet, double meaning implies something else and something more. The page and the knight also figure as representatives of the 11th and 12th principles within the 11th and 12th houses, conveying the commandments of their king and queen as messengers or officers, and simultaneously standing, as it were, for the entire suit collectively, whereas in the former sense, namely as higher octaves of the 3 and 4, they serve as the messenger and bridge from one suit to the next. Astrologers will be capable of drawing immediate conclusions from these coincidences, which are absolutely natural. One further detail may be added in this section. The cards of the heart suit must relate to years, to daytime, and to summer. Those of the cup suit to months, to nighttime, and to winter. The swords to days. Whereas wands appear to possess little relation to time and may consequently signify that an event will not occur at all, remains in the realm of ideas, or is in the very act of occurring at that moment. These particulars may prove useful in the practice of divination. Furthermore, hearts relate to gold, cups to silver and money in general. Wands may relate to paper money, effects, shares, bonds, and deeds. Swords relate to material objects and may, in general, indicate the cost or price of items, losses, and debts, as well as things purchased with money. In proportion to the more or less exoteric standpoint of the K-Rent and the practitioner of divination, hearts will specifically indicate good and yes, spades bad and no, while wands may signify indifferent, perhaps, doubtful, relatively, or as yet undecided. And cups do not appear to confer any specific meaning regarding these matters, save that they may cause feelings to distort the facts. They also indicate the sentiment with which the facts will be received or encountered. Hearts are sunny and more or less Venusian. Cups are jovial, sometimes Neptunian, and may become loony in weak cases. Spades are martial and, by reflex, Saturnian. Wands are mercurial and sometimes Uranian. To conclude these considerations regarding the lesser arcana, it is instructive to compare a general figure or diagram of the process of creation with the four suits of the tarot. It will be observed that even the symbolic figures of our playing cards are distinctly recognizable therein. The four court cards of each suit collectively comprise the full zodiac. When the soul attains perfection, the oval form becomes a circle, and the nearer this state is approached, the more the two focal points of the ellipse draw together, and the inscribed quadrangle approaches the square. Chapter 3. The Greater Arcana. In the Greater Arcana, competent authors on the subject have rightly discerned a system for rendering or symbolizing the great cosmic principles of creation per se. These are not in relation to any specific plane or element but exist above them, and are consequently to be considered the abstract origin of all that is contained within the lesser arcana. Pappus provides us with descriptions of the greater arcana from the Book of Hermes, which will likely remain the concrete source of all later descriptions up to our own time. How this book has been transmitted through the ages is unknown to me, yet the clarity and systematic accuracy of these descriptions attest to a high origin. However, where Pappus, in his work The Tarot of the Bohemians, ventures to indicate a relationship between the symbols of the greater arcana and zodiacal or planetary principles, he is hopelessly in error. He does not insist upon it, nor does he appear to utilize these relations or explain how they are to be derived. Logic is entirely absent from this particular aspect of his interpretations. Without any difficulty or doubt, we perceive in the first 12 arcanas the essential natures of the 12 zodiacal houses. We know not what manner of conclusions Dr. Pappus and others may have drawn for themselves, but it appears rather astonishing that this analogy has never been stated publicly. Arcana 22 or 0. The Fool must evidently be taken as the principle of the earth itself, upon which we are carried away in space, unable to loose ourselves from its course. It may equally be interpreted as the Pars Fortunae, which must not be confused with the Wheel of Fortune in the series of the arcanas. This latter has as much to do with the former as the cusp of the 10th house in a horoscope has with the Pars Fortunae. We shall treat each of these cards in its turn hereafter. First, however, let us examine the scheme at large. Chapter 4. The Method of Divination. In the same manner that the Chinese book I Ching was originally edited or taught as a volume of wisdom and insight into universal principles, stages of being and becoming. Do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.